without getting into names or details, but
Yeah.
how are things going at in the education system here?
I think it's really tough. I think there's so much that's expected from one person
Hmm.
because you have one adult, a teacher in a classroom, and you have large class sizes, and every child needs individual attention and individual teaching.
Hmm.
And it's very hard, and I think it's very stressful, and they put more and more demands, more paperwork, more stress. And so I think everybody is working so hard, and I think especially after the gap after COVID,
Hmm.
because I think teaching was like that before, but I think it's even more so now after COVID. But you have one person who has to individualize 25
Different learners.
different learners,
Yeah.
and keep everybody engaged. So it's very stressful.
I found that just the teaching job alone, aside from all the extra stuff,
Yeah.
you have to be the like we joked earlier about us being for the students, we're their doctor, their
Yeah.
nurse, their
Yeah.
mommy, their daddy, their
Yeah.
psychiatrist, their
Yeah.
counselor, but you're also having to be this game show host,
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
show host. You're having to be all of this, and you're having to compete
Yeah.
with TikTok,
Yeah.
YouTube, all these things that they're used to. And you're having to take them and say, hey, I know you'd rather be playing Among Us or Fortnite or
Yeah.
being on TikTok, but let's talk about Jamestown instead.
Right.
And it's like
Yeah.
it's kind of, and you have to kind of really reel them in, and that just a
Yeah.
regular student, just getting them to follow you with that takes
Yeah.
tremendous, without lack of a better term, tremendous mojo and energy
Yeah. It
just
does.
to get that. But
Yeah.
what really kills me too is what you're saying is that then on top of that, there seems to be so much piled on top of teachers. It's almost like there are teachers are doing the job of like three or four people.
Yes, just
Hmm.
meetings and the
Yep.
paperwork and the deadlines and having contact with the parents. It's just a lot.
I wonder, again, and it's one of those things where I feel like there's a disconnect between. I mean, I'm not going to turn down. I wouldn't turn down more money, but I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of cases it's less about money and it's more about, like, I'd rather take a little bit of a pay cut and
Yeah.
have another staff member
Yeah.
to
I
jump
think
in
that
and,
would actually be so helpful, or even like smaller class sizes.
oh, big
You
time.
know. Yeah.
You know,
Even if, there's such a difference between 20 kids and 25 kids, and
huge.
18, 25. There's such a difference that even small cuts could really help a person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Since leaving the public school, I've been teaching online, and my class sizes range from, like, I have a couple classes I just have one student, but a
Yeah.
lot of my classes are like five or six, in some cases seven students.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like teaching in small group, but that's your class,
Yeah.
and you have so much more you can do so much more personalized.
Yeah.
And when you're having, and it's tough because you this is a job you can't really fake. And a
Yeah.
lot of other jobs, people talk about quiet quitting, where when
Yeah.
they start feeling like they're not appreciated, they just start sitting back
Yeah.
doing the bare minimum. But in the teacher's case, it's so incredibly hard to do that. And but then also if there's such a demand where you start to feel burnout. Like, I
Yeah.
remember, like, one of the main reasons I left was I couldn't be me anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't be the teacher I wanted to be, and
Yeah.
and on top of that, do all these extra expectations that in a lot of times almost, not to get into serious stuff, but like, I didn't feel appreciated. I had a
Yeah.
master's degree in education, and I
Yeah.
have people that have less experience than me telling me that the what I've been doing that's been working for 10 years
Yeah.
is somehow suddenly wrong because they read a book.
Yeah.
and I feel, and what's interesting is in talking with so many colleagues feel the same way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yet it's like, and that has such a devastation to your self-worth. And
Yeah.
and that, I made a commitment to myself when I first started teaching. The moment that I stopped wanting to see the kids,
Yeah.
I needed to get out. When I started resenting the kids,
Yeah.
that's when I had to get out. And it wasn't the kids' fault. It was just I was so drained of
Yeah.
everything
Yeah. Nothing
that,
left to give. Yeah.
yeah. And so, I see so many great teachers being put into that position,
And the
and
thing
it's
is,
heartbreaking.
most of the teachers I've ever met
Mm-hmm.
are helpers, and they want to go in, they want to do good, they
Mm-hmm.
want to have fun, they want to have relation, like they're there because they want to,
Mm-hmm.
and they've always had to give more, and they did it, but then it just became more and more and more, and you know it's hard. It is just hard, and I think you're right. Like, if it takes a while when you're teaching for anybody, I think, to get your groove, to see what works, to
Yeah.
see what doesn't work, So instead of, it should be more of a group discussion. Like, yeah, I've always found this has really worked well for me,
Mm-hmm.
and because reading a book or just coming out of college, it sounds good, but really you got to get on the field. You got to start playing, and what works, what doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
you
Oh,
know.
big time. I go back to my one of my. I know I've told you this story a couple times before, but where my first lesson I ever taught it was my practicum. It wasn't even my student teaching. It was my practicum. So I'm in this fifth grade classroom, and I've been observing the classroom up to this point, and so the teacher felt comfortable with me enough. She said, "All right, I'm going to let you teach this lesson on the." And I think it was something about the life cycle of a plant or something like that. It was something like that. So I spend the weekend, and everything that I've been taught about Kagan structures, jigsaw, all these different like all these educational philosophies, and I'm making this thing, and I'm writing it, and I put it, and I've got this golden like lesson plan that's like, it was like from up on high. It had all the bullet points, and all the
Yeah.
learning targets, and everything in it. I go in, and I'm all confident ready to teach this lesson to these fifth graders, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
It was a disaster. Within 2 minutes, I'm trying to explain the lesson. And I'm trying to get, and it was one of those things where I gave each student a different job and I explained what the job was. And then, of course, once you realize it's like, I didn't have the teacher experience to pivot. So
Yeah.
I'm still trying to push this lesson the way it is and not pivoting for anything. And the kids, and then the kids, just like sharks, they could sense blood in the water. So they knew, Mr. Burton didn't know what he's doing, so we're going to act up loose. And immediately, of course, the teacher is she's in the back taking notes, and she's just got this little smirk on her face.
Yeah.
And of course, unfortunately, this was like it was like the last 30 minutes before dismissal.
Yeah.
So finally, I just was like, all right, here's the worksheet. Here, we'll just do this. And then they leave.
Yeah.
And then she pulls me aside, and she sits down, and I'm just like, so defeated.
What?
I'm just like, maybe this isn't my gig. And I sit down with her, and the first thing she says, she looks at me, she goes, all right, before I give you any feedback, I got to ask you one question. She said, how many lessons have you taught? And I said, including this one, one. And she laughed, and she goes, that's what I thought. All right. It's gonna come, and then she gave me the real deal. She said it's gonna take you years to develop your gig, and she gave me good criticism, and she said, you already know this stuff, but this is don't try, if you got to learn to pivot, you got to learn to improvise and blah blah blah, but that'll come. But that was the big thing too. She said it'll come. You're going to stumble. You're going to, and I think that's good in life too. You're gonna stumble. And sometimes you don't really learn unless you do that.
Yeah. No, I think about, like, if I go to the hospital, do I want a nurse who has just come out of college, or do I want a nurse who's been on the floor for 5 years?
Yeah, I'm gonna have open heart surgery. Do I
Yeah,
want the 21-year-old med student?
yeah,
Oh, let me make or do I want the old surgeon that's
yeah,
been cutting people for years?
yeah,
Maybe not if his hand is like this, but at
yeah.
least he could tell people. Catch new episodes of Mental Health Mondays every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Start your week off with a smile and some inspiration.